my daughter Deanne and her family, my grandson.
I like your big sign uptown.
Friday.
Okay.
But the tenant meeting's supposed to know it.
Well, I still get 50 calls a day.
Hey.
50 calls.
Hello there, sir. Good. How about you? It's lovely, huh? Trust what I tell you.
Okay. Feel for it. We got a good night's ride. Okay.
You said to me,
Right. Are you really? Be back at work.
It all just builds up. You miss a Monday, it's just like, or if I miss a Sunday,
And
it's
just
Tuesday.
powerful and all that's on the budget side.
Right.
One just playing catch up.
Is it a Word or PDF? Are we going? I think it's in PDF. How much to just the summer? Are we going to stop?
Man, you sick.
That was a go tree.
Oh no, man, I had surgery on Saturday.
Good morning. Good morning, Cynthia.
You had you see Dan?
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the workshop, everybody. Let's get started. Okay, let me get my glasses so I can see what we're doing. Okay. Is that our first item, the budget?
Isn't there two other items on there? I don't know.
Can you put the agenda up?
Water contract.
You got the water contract and you got the Heritage
request.
Park discussion.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is to discuss a request by Spalding County Water and Sewerage Facility Authority to extend the current water sales agreement between the City of Griffin, Spalding County, and the Water Authority. Spalding County and the Water Authority from January 1, 2021 until midnight, December 31st, 2022.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As you know, our current water sales agreement with Spalding County Water and Sewer Facilities Authority expires December the 31st, 2020. We received a letter from Spalding County requesting to begin negotiations back in February of 2018. In January of 2019, we began discussions about a joint city and county water authority. That was brought to both bodies to discuss back in March. In April, the County Water Authority proposed a 2-year extension to the current contract, which would effectively extend the current contract to December 31st, 2022. As we discussed in March, it will probably take us 2 to 3 years to fully examine, give us ample time to perform due diligence to determine if a joint authority is in fact feasible. We'll have to identify and appraise all of our assets, as would the county. That will be very costly to do, as you can imagine. We'll have to review our wholesale contracts. We'll have to look at the separation of the city's combined utilities, since the electric department is part of the water and sewer combined utilities. And then after we do all that examination, it would take legislative action to form a new authority. The 2-year extension would give us 42 months, or approximately 3.5 years, to complete this process. At the last County Water Authority meeting on May the 15th, the County Water Authority appointed 2 committees. One committee to negotiate with us on the current contract renewal and or the possibility of a combined authority. The second committee was to investigate and analyze the possibility of at least 2 alternate water suppliers for the county, which would in essence mean that they would separate our systems, which are now combined through master meters, and then buy their water from another wholesale water supplier. The authority is already near completion of an engineering study to separate those 2 systems, where they could buy water from another supplier, which would mean that they then would maintain their own system. The County Water Authority in their fiscal year 18 audit stated that their fiscal year revenue exceeded their expenditures by $750,000, that they had unrestricted funds of about $14 million, and on March the 31st, their financials stated that they have $8,347,000 cash on hand. Considering separating the system, to me, at least personally, as a ratepayer, doesn't seem like the most efficient thing to do for city water ratepayers or county water ratepayers, as you would then have 2 water systems, 2 staffs, 2 billing systems. You'd have a complete duplication of the 2 entities. The County Water Authority has requested an answer to their request for a 2-year extension by June the 1st. They meet again on June the 12th. So staff's recommendation would be to recommend the completion of the negotiation of the current contract by its end, December 31st, 2020, or at least a 3-year extension to December 31st of 2023 in order for us to completely vet our options for a combined authority. That would give us a little over 4 years to do the necessary steps to look at a combined authority. So that would be staff's recommendation, those 2 options, preferably just to go ahead and renegotiate the current contract.
With those 3 years, you were saying it would probably, if we went through the other processes, it would probably take us about 3.5 years. Then after the 3.5 years, if one of the options was to go ahead with the joint authority, then it would take several more years in order to put that in place.
I would estimate it would take us about a good 2 to 3 years to go through the necessary steps. And it would take considerable finances to do that, as we would have to pay for an appraisal of all of our assets. We would have to look at legal ramifications, bond ramifications to separate our combined utilities. And then after we do all that, to determine if it's feasible, then we would have to wait on legislative action once we made that determination. So it would depend on, once that determination was made, obviously the legislature only meets January through March of each year. So we may have to wait for the legislature to meet with legislative action to form a new authority. So being on the safe side, I would think it would take us a good 4 years to go through that complete process. And Drew may have an opinion on that as well.
Kenny, who's paying for that process?
Beg your pardon?
Who's paying for that process? Who's paying for
We would obviously have to pay for the assessment and the appraisals and the legal fees to do that. Well, the water ratepayers would ultimately pay for it, and then the county would have to do the same thing. They would have to have their assets identified and appraised as well. If we were looking at whether they're paying us for our assets, we're paying them for their assets.
Why should we pay them for their assets? I mean,
Well, all that is to be determined in these negotiations, but we don't know until we get them assessed, evaluated, and appraised.
do we have any idea what the costs associated with that might be?
I would probably guess north of 100,000 or more, I would think. Brant may have a professional opinion on that.
Just for the city side, after going through the evaluation we did with Coweta, it cost you somewhere between 100 and I'd say 125,000 to have somebody come through and do a detailed analysis. Because it would have to be finite, because if we do segregate or we do decide to do a joint authority, you got to know what's sitting on the ground. Sure.
And that would be both city and county would have to do, that'd be just us.
We've got 200 miles of pipe, plus we've got all the treatment facilities and distribution in the system, and then the county's got 500 miles of pipe that they have to redo. And the booster stations, you got water tanks, you got the whole 9 yards. Well,
I agree with Kenny's assessment. I don't think 2 years anywhere near long enough. I think it's going to take probably 3 to 4 years to do it right.
That's what I was thinking.
And I think really the cost is going to be far more than $100,000. I think you're going to see probably 3 times that just to appraise the systems we have.
We weren't talking about attorney fees, we were talking about.
Well, I think appraisal costs are going to be much higher.
You said that one of the staff recommendations is to extend through 2023, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So it would be,
It would be a 3-year extension on to the end of the contract, which expires in 2020.
Okay, so it's,
That would extend it until December 31st of 2023.
okay.
Kenny, why is the extension even necessary? How long has this process been going on? I've only been on this board for a little over a year, but it sounds like they were given or advised to, come back in and renegotiate this contract several years ago, and here we are sitting here today, and the contract's about up. So
That was what's the question?
the question is why is it being brought to us now? Why was it?
Well, we received a letter, as I mentioned, we got a letter from the Water Authority February the 12th of 2018 saying that we were starting negotiations, but we haven't had very much negotiating until very recently.
Who are they negotiating with?
We got an MOU in 2012 from them to start negotiations, but they just started in 18.
Well,
6 years later.
we were put on notice in 18. We really didn't start negotiating seriously until about January of this year. If you recall, last year they asked for the Coweta contract.
Right.
We gave them Coweta contract and they rejected that. So we really hadn't started in earnest on this process until the last 2 or 3 months.
If memory serves me correctly, I think your revenue bonds on your water and sewer system outstanding till 2036, is that right, Marcus?
32.
32?
Yeah.
Okay. And those bonds, though, are really funded by our combined utility system, which includes our electric system. To make this work, there's got to be probably a reissuance of debt before all this is said and done. And I think that's going to be difficult. I think it's going to force everybody's cost of water, whether you're in the city or the county, up, and probably up substantially. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line as I see it at this point.
We really haven't gotten to the process where we know that that's going to be the issue, because this might not even be something that we, after we look at all the options, that we'll be considering doing.
Yeah, I mean, you could go through this whole process and spend that amount of money and find out that it's not an option.
Right.
That's just a risk. That's a risk that you run. And I'm not saying it's a joint authority is not a good thing or it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it will be a difficult thing and an expensive thing, but I mean, it's certainly a possibility.
So are the options that we're presented with to either can negotiate without an extension or put the extension in place to allow for the study of the authority, or is that to just, like, is that a condition that if we allow for an extension that we automatically have to study the idea of an authority, or are we saying that we can extend it just to extend negotiations?
Yes, ma'am. You can extend it just to extend negotiations if you'd like.
Or you could extend it for the sake of, for them to give them more time to bank more money and look for other options to buy other water resources and leave us.
Well, I think
In
kind of what
3
I'm
years or
asking
4
is
years.
if we extend it, what are we putting ourselves, what type of financial liability? Because I know we're saying like, oh, it would be this much to study and that much to study and this side and that side. So are we, by agreeing to an extension, obligating ourselves to some financial anything? You understand what I'm saying?
The risk is
I
if we
do.
lose them as a customer, that there's no more transfer money to our
Right,
account.
no, I get
There's
that
no more.
portion of it.
There's a higher cost of water and sewer rates to our
No, I
customers.
get what happens if we lose them as a customer, but so I mean, I understand the reasoning for having an immediate resolution to, hey, we need to go ahead and extend this contract out. But I guess what I'm saying is, what is the understanding? Is that if an extension is offered, is there like this implied understanding that there's going to be a study about an authority?
Not necessarily. That's up to you.
Okay.
You can extend it just for further negotiations. But I think if the intent is just to negotiate the current contract, we got plenty of time to do that before December 31st, 2020, so I don't see the point in extending it just for further negotiations of the current contract.
Right.
If we go ahead and do it, we've got plenty of time to negotiate the current contract.
How much, I know Dr. Keller said like in the 100,000 range, how much assessment can we do of our own system without incurring significant debt? Like, can we use the numbers from the Coweta contract to have a general idea about what our assets are?
I would say that would be quite dated at this point. That was, 8 years, 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago? So,
Okay.
I doubt it. I mean, at the end of the day, everything boils down to money.
Right.
So Spalding County is looking at getting a cheaper rate whether they get a cheaper rate from us or whether they get a cheaper rate from another supplier. The difference is if they get a cheaper rate from another supplier, they're going to have to spend millions and millions of dollars to separate the system, and it appears that that's why they've been saving this money over the years, so they have those options at the end of the contract.
Them separating the systems, other than us losing them as a customer, will it cost anything for us if they just separate?
No, they would pay the capital cost to separate the system. We would just lose them as a customer, which would be detrimental to the city ratepayer.
It'll affect us $4 to $5 million a year in revenue.
Big part.
It'll affect us $4 to $5 million in revenue, not only losing the 1.8 we transfer from the combined water sewer fund, but looking at about $3.2 million in shortfall of cash from the numbers that Dr. Keller gave me last year.
Well, I mean, anytime you lose a wholesale customer that's contracted, you're losing money.
So, but the staff recommendation is that we go ahead and extend it, actually extend it an extra 3 years instead of 2 years.
Staff's recommendation is to either go ahead and negotiate the contract before the end of 2020, or if we're going to extend it in order to look at an authority, we need more than 2 additional years from our perspective. So we would ask that it be extended to December 31st, 2023.
Okay.
Is the staff recommendation that we negotiate now or negotiate?
Yes.
That would be my vote.
That's what I'm leaning towards.
What?
Let's get it done, 25-year extension, and let's roll this contract.
At this point, we've got a year and a half to negotiate. I mean, I think if worst case scenario, if it gets to that point, there is always an option to extend, but in good faith, we should try to negotiate and not continue extending it out.
That's
I agree with that. Okay, so we need a motion?
No.
No, I don't think we need to take action. If that's the consensus of the board, I can pass that along to the Water Authority on their June 12th meeting.
Let's do it.
Okay. Next item is Spalding County Chair Rita Johnson and County Commissioner Gwen Flowers Taylor would like to present a request for city participation in funding of the Spalding County Heritage Park SPLOST project.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Very rarely do I get a chance to do this. I'm excited to be here with you all today with a request. As you know, one of our 2015 SPLOST projects was the Heritage Park project. You probably have already learned that it's about $7 million to fund the project. We're coming before you today, as we have been also with the school board, and asking for your assistance. Particularly, we're asking for $1.3 million, which is in your excess SPLOST collections, to go toward the project. And particularly specifically, we think this will go half toward the gymnasium, but Spalding County would pay for the other half of that. We've asked the school board to $3.6 million to fund the schools, and they're considering that project as well. And I know this seems like a lot, but kind of want to remind you, take you back to Archways, our retreat, a little over a year ago, or even 6 months ago. We were going to make this project a priority. We believe this is going to assist in the Griffin plus Spalding initiative. So we're asking you today if you would consider $1.3 million of your excess SPLOST funds that would go toward this very important project. Invest in that for the community that you would benefit from, as well as everyone, and the revitalization economically would have a tremendous impact in the community. So we're asking you to consider that for us today. And I'll have Commissioner Flowers Taylor also to come and present her case.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gwen Flowers Taylor, 134 Spalding Street. There's a couple of different truths, I think, that I would just like to share with you guys before we start talking. We, as a county, when I say we got involved with the project over at the Heritage Park because the Housing Authority was interested in revitalizing that neighborhood. And because of that impetus, the city came on board with their revitalization in that area, and it basically kind of became a community project once we decided to support a SPLOST that would help to revitalize the recreation facilities in that area. I have to admit, we didn't follow industry practice. When I say we, I say the county, in getting full engineering cost on the front side of the SPLOST, and as a result of that, we have found ourselves in a position where the amount of money that we budgeted for that does not remotely come close to what it's going to cost to renovate that historic site. Another truth is that we did not accurately and fully research the history associated with that project. Had we done that, we would have known that one of the buildings that we tore down was also a historic part of the equalization school. And when we realized this at that time, we realized that the other building we were going to destroy was in fact part of the historical equalization school. We made a decision as a government to try and save that building. So the funding for that building, which is $2.3 million for the equalization building, was nowhere on the SPLOST. That is just something that we felt was important for the community. In hindsight, I guess I really do need to thank the city because they have collaborated with us on several projects in the past. I think you have to give credit where credit is due. When we tore down the first part of the equalization school, the city was open enough. They waived the dumping fees, help us to clean the project up. You guys even deeded us the land to where the old Fairmont pool was, the pool that was covered up in the 60s. So I understand that the city has come to the table and has collaborated with us and helped us all along with this project. Additionally, you helped us with the lights and the security at Fairmont. That helped us. It helped the Housing Authority, and it helped the city as well. We're all interested in suppressing crime and beautifying that community. We worked together on for financial assistance. You guys helped us with the airport. We were in a situation where you had the money and we didn't, and we felt like we were able to work that out, and I think that's working out for both of us. We're trying to collaborate now on the service delivery strategy, as well as the Unified Housing and Animal Control ordinance. So we worked together. We worked together to help make sure that the College and Career Academy was funded together. And we worked together on multiple previous SPLOSTs. What I'd like to share with you is what we need as a county commission from you guys. We need to know that you, the City Board of Commissioners, will stand with us in understanding and supporting the importance of the economic impact that this project is going to have, not only on the city, but the county and that community in a whole. We need for you to help us to provide in-kind services and to financially support this project with in-kind services or capital when and if possible. We need for you to help us to keep the community informed of the value of this project, the importance of having this project to happen and be completed in that community. We need you to continue to set the high standards that you have set, that all of us, all of these other intergovernmental agencies within the county have to work toward. You set the standards for excellence, and so we want to make sure that you stay at that level and that you push the rest of us to be able to do that as well. So what we really need from you now is the financial assistance with the renovations of the gym and, if possible, the equalization building. We need ideas from you on how the use of the equalization building can truly become a community area, and how that building can, the financing of that, renovations of that building can help pay for themselves. We're at the table looking for ideas for that, and of course we ask you to support us in that. I heard Commissioner Johnson say that we were asking for some financial assistance in terms of looking at your excess SPLOST collections. I'm just simply here to say I think that you all know the importance of this project, and we'll look forward to making the best decisions that you can, not only for the city, but for the community. So we just hope that you sincerely consider our request and look as hard as you can to see if there's some way that you can help us with this project to its completion.
Question.
questions, Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Smith,
Yes, sir.
in regards to the splost collections, is there going to be projected $1.3 million of excess splost funds based on?
I would have to see the county's financials on where they came up with that. I'm not aware of $1.3 million in excess SPLOST funds. As you are aware, months and months ago, we discussed that the historic City Hall was considerably over budget. That SPLOST project, until we got in there and realized what kind of shape that building was in, we did not budget enough in SPLOST, and our intent was to take funds from our PAYGO projects, our substandard demo, and our transportation funds to offset the excess budget of the historic City Hall. You gave me the approval to do that, and we were planning on putting that money back into those PAYGO projects if the revenue exceeded the amount that we had estimated in collecting of SPLOST. Right now, the SPLOST collections are considerably over estimates. The historic City Hall is probably somewhere, I mean, we don't even know yet because we're still working with that project to finalize it, but it's going to be somewhere between probably $750,000, $800,000 over budget itself. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed that our collections exceed our estimates so that we can pay for that building. So I'm not aware of any excess SPLOST funds at this point, much less $1.3 million worth.
Thank you.
Now, in-kind services, I mean, we can do whatever we can do from an in-kind standpoint to assist them in this project. We feel like that project is very, very valuable to our entire community. We can certainly keep the community informed of the value of that particular project. I don't have $1 million.
You know, we've got the substandard housing fund, $500,000 a year that's budgeted. When you drive around that area, there's still a significant amount of slum and blight. I know we've got part of that targeted for this.
We could spend 3 times that much on substandard housing.
Trying to, besides what we're doing with Spring Hill as a target, possibly target some of those to help the aesthetics in the area. But I think as an in-kind assistance could
What
be
are you
better.
saying?
Well, just to be, we've got the substandard housing fund
Just go ahead and clean
that
it.
we've targeted a lot of that towards the Spring Hill area,
Okay, so you're saying
but we could assist.
we'll clean up.
We could
but
help.
We consider that as in kind to that.
Well, part of it, the money that we have available in the current SPLOST, because there's some eyesores in that area.
I think we can come up with like in-kind or other areas where we might be able to help, but Ken already said we don't have $1.3 million.
Right.
We don't have it. We don't have it.
Madam Mayor, may I clarify the 1.3 million?
Yes, please.
Please.
What we did was estimate collections through the end, which is March of 2022, and estimated based on the collections so far, the average is $741,000 per month. We took that out the full 72 months of the collections, and that will give $1.3 million to the city, $1.6 million to the county, and I had advised my commissioners that we could pledge our 1.6, and if we could get some more here, that's where that came from. I'm not saying the money is here now. I'm saying we will know in April of 2022 when the collections are sent to us, but it would, if estimates hold true, if the $741,000 holds true, it looks like it's going to be approximately that number. Not that you have it right now. Not at all.
Well, even with that being said, we still have to replace the monies that we spent for over budgeting down there, so that money's still gone.
Yeah, I mean, if all that holds true and those estimates do come to fruition over the next 2 or 3 years, and we have an excess of the monies that we had planned on when we passed the SPLOST, I would have no heartburn in assisting the county, but I would hate to make that decision today based on what may happen over 2 years from now. I'm sorry.
I just asked, I said, do we have to pledge that today? I didn't know how this worked.
We can.
Okay.
Yes, so just for clarity, I'm comfortable with us leaving that open for consideration as we get closer to that date and we have more actual numbers. But certainly we can't give what we don't have.
And Kenny, isn't this a topic that probably ought to come under our future service delivery talks later this year?
Probably so.
I mean, I think right now all recreation falls in the county.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
We got to do the budget presentation. Yeah, you ready to go?
Okay, now,
Or if you just want to say we have no questions, I can sit down.
we'll go ahead and let you do it.
Oh, we're going to have
I
some
like the
questions.
5 point.
Oh, you are?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. You ready to go?
You ready?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought maybe we were going to say a prayer or something first.
Now, all of the people who are here now are the people that were in the room on February 22nd. I think that's the day I took the minutes.
You took minutes.
At February 22nd, when we were down at Gordon, when we decided what we were going to do. Is that's what this is?
I'm here, yes, sir.
Please
Okay.
proceed with your presentation.
Okay. And I think what Mr. McCord is referring to are the goals and areas of importance that we discussed at our annual retreat.
We did.
Because we try to tie our spending every year in line with our goals and areas of importance. But before I get to that, I have to thank Marcus and Angela. Of course, Angela is the one that makes all this come together, and she's going to answer any questions you have as I go through the presentation, right? And she has her computer ready, so if you have any questions that we need to look back on, Angela has done a tremendous job as she does every year. And keep in mind, it's not easy to do a $122 million budget on an Excel spreadsheet. And that's what we do every year, and how she does it, I'm amazed by it every year, but it all works out. So thanks to Angela, to Marcus, and the financial staff. And Ms. O'Connor played an important role in our budget this year as well. So I want to thank all the staff, the department directors who went through some trying times with me as we spend hours and hours going through this every year. This year's budget was quite different, and it was quite difficult. Back at Gordon in February, we discussed one of our most important goals was to implement the salary survey and the pay plan update. To do that, we had to carefully scrutinize every revenue source. We had to carefully scrutinize every line item in our budget. We went back to a zero-based budget where we looked at every pencil, every piece of paper, every purchase that was made to carefully scrutinize that so we could look at meeting our goals. The recruitment and retention of qualified people has been a challenge over the last several years, and certainly a goal for the last several years was to update our pay plan, especially in some of our more skilled areas that we have seen most of the turnover. Now, implementing the pay plan was not the only goal. As you can see there, we talked more about blight, about litter and junk, about substandard housing, and also about making sure that our downtown is vibrant as well. So those are the things that we focused on this year. So let's get into the numbers. Our revenues overall exceeded our expenditures by $1.9 million. We've projected our fiscal year 20 revenues to be about $122.5 million, up from about $115 projected in fiscal year 19, but keep in mind that that includes $750,000 in CDBG grant funds. It includes all of our TADs. It includes $3.8 million in SPLOST money. That includes all of our enterprise funds. Our general fund, in particular, our expenditures each year exceed our revenues. This year, that's about $8.5 million. In the current budgeted year that we're in now, fiscal year 19, we were looking at about $8.3 million. Our general fund revenue, not counting our transfers, is up about $350,000. Last year, it was up almost $1 million. One of the things that we discussed at length was how to implement this pay plan and what that would do to our taxpayers. I'm proud to tell you that through the scrutiny of our budgeted items, our department directors looking closely at their needs, we are able to implement our pay study with no property tax increase planned for our taxpayers. Our property tax is the same as last year. It's estimated to come in at $3.9 million. The county tax assessor has said that they're estimating an 8% average increase in residential property assessments. We kind of look for an increase every year, and due to different exemptions and things that seem to happen over the year, sometimes our balloon gets busted when we get those assessments and those tax notices in toward the end of the year. So we did not plan for any growth. We did not plan for any tax increase. We're again estimating our tax revenue to be $3.9 million. At the end of fiscal year 18, we had $3.9 million. At the end of 17, we had $3.8 million. So we feel like that's a conservative number to estimate on our property tax with no tax increase. We are projecting an increase in our motor vehicle tax and our TAVT. The TAVT consistently is going up. The motor vehicle tax is going down. When we average those two together, however, we're estimating about $195,000 increase. And our local option sales tax, as we just discussed from a SPLOST perspective, our lost tax continues to increase, so we're estimating about a $300,000 increase in our lost projections. We estimate our license and permits to be up about $21,000. Those are regulatory fees. We estimate our fines and forfeitures to be up about $100,000. Last year, we really didn't budget anything for ordinance fines, but because of the good work of our police department and our code enforcement people, we see a little increase in ordinance fines. So when you add those together, we're estimating a $100,000 increase right now. We're on track to do a little better this year than we anticipated. Our insurance premium tax is also up, so our total general fund revenue, as I mentioned, without transfers, is about $350,000. And our total general fund expenses are up about $641,000 from what we estimated this year. Our transfer to the general fund from all other funds this year is about $10.5 million. Last year it was $10.3 million. Our transfers out of the general fund are at about $2 million. So our net transfer from general fund is about $8.5 million. It was $8.3 this year and $8.6 last year. So we're staying about average on our net transfer to the general fund. Our total budget of all funds sees our revenue estimates to be $6.8 million. And that's up from the original fiscal year 19 projection. However, keep in mind that our LCI is almost $5 million of that, so it's really not that much. Our projected expenses are up about $9.5 million from our original fiscal year 19, and that is all funds. That includes all funds. Our capital requests are down considerably this year. Our total capital is at $13.5 million, and you say, well, that's up from this year, but again, that LCI grant's about $6 million of that. In transportation, our CDBG is $1.3 million, our SPLOST is $1.156. So if you take those away from capital projects, you'll see that our normal capital equipment's about $5 million, which is considerably down from the $7.2 million last year. Our general fund capital is even less at $876,000. In fiscal year 19, that was $1.3 million. Personnel continues to comprise about 27% of our total budget. So anytime we do anything that impacts personnel, it has a significant impact on our budget. Talking about our salary increases, our goal was to implement the Archer salary survey and the pay plan update. Our goal was to implement that at 100%. Also, in order to address compression, we wanted to give a 2.5% and a 5% raise for compression, 2.5%. If you were here less than 3 years, you would go to the minimum of the pay study. If you were here 3 to 5 years, you would get a 2.5% raise of your current salary. If you were here more than 5 years, you would get a 5% increase in your current salary to avoid that compression. Our goal was to implement that at 100% and make it effective July the 1st, 2019. For instance, a police officer increase would go from their current starting pay of $34,600 to the new starting pay of about $39,000 to make us more competitive there. Our firefighters would go from $31,300 to $35,200. An equipment operator 2, which is a non-CDL equipment operator, would go from an estimated $23,300 to $27,800, which is a 19% increase. These are minimum starting pays. Okay, a wastewater plant operator would go from $46,500 to about $53,800, which is a 15% increase. A water service worker would go from $20,108 to $23,400, which is a 16% increase. Our electric lineman, where, as you know, we were really having difficulty at this point being competitive there, would see about a 30% increase, a little over a 30% increase. Starting pay would go from $56,500 to $62,700, still below the market, but much more competitive. A solid waste refuge collector would go from $20,100 to about $23,400. If you will indulge me just a minute, I want to show you something. I want to refer to the web page where you see our current job openings. As I scroll through this, and unfortunately we're looking for an electric director now, equipment operator. I think we have, as of today, about 6 vacancies in our police department. We're looking for water operators 1, 2, and 3, lab technician, IT help desk administrator. We're down to 1 code enforcement officer at this point rather than 4. We have no court bailiffs now. Airport's looking for a part-time position. Stormwater has how many openings now? 3 openings in that small department. This engineering technician job in electric has been open for a couple of years, 3 years, something like that. And our electric line crews are down to like 1.5 crews where we have normally had 5 to 6. Solid waste refuge collectors, which has minimal turnover normally, is now down. Water wastewater equipment operators, commercial solid waste equipment operators, mechanics. So the list goes on and on and on. Laborers in the street department, where if you get calls about the right-of-ways not being cut, that's why. And it goes on and on and on. And I know you see that, and I know you're aware of it. I felt like I needed to bring that to your attention. Actually, what I'd like to do with that information in mind, and based on the vacancies that we now have and that we have had all year, I'd like for you to give me permission to implement that salary increase immediately, or as soon as Human Resources could get all the paperwork done rather than wait until July the 1st. Budgetarily, we can handle it because we've had all those vacancies all year. You're talking about a month early, 3 weeks early. So I hate to surprise you with that, but it came to me last night, so I didn't prepare you for it.
No problem. Just my hand up. I support that.
Absolutely.
As soon as payroll can get the information entered, I don't know how long, it's a pretty extensive list, so I'm not sure how long it'll take them to do that, but if everybody's okay with that, we'll do that. Insurance, we were very lucky this year that our health insurance did not increase through a whole lot of negotiations and quite a bit of help from our broker, Matt Bidwell, who does an outstanding job for us. There's no insurance increase for our employees, and there are no modifications to the plan. Actually, our total premiums went down about $159,000. If you take that decrease and divide it by the employees, they would get about a $2 per pay period savings. So what we decided to do was to take $200 for each employee and put it in their flex spending account. So every employee will get a flex spending card where the first $200 of their deductible or their prescription or ever how they want to use that flex spending will be paid for by the city. So that's been explained to our employees, and every employee will get that flex spending card to take care of $200 of their upfront cost. We're adding about $80,000 into our claims expense, and we're increasing our smoking surcharge. We put a smoking surcharge in effect in 2012, 7 years ago, and we haven't updated that. Hopefully, because of that surcharge, we're encouraging people to quit smoking because, as you know, smoking is proven to be detrimental to our health.
For medicinal purposes.
Sir?
Never mind.
Okay. So we went back to the state's requirement on their health insurance, and we're increasing that biweekly from $9.24 to $18.46. Our dental insurance had no change. Our vision insurance had no change. Our long-term disability had no change. And our pension cost went down minutely. Our share, the city's share, is now 19.3%, and the employee continues to contribute 2% to the pension. As we talk about every year, fuel is a best guess, and you've seen the fluctuation in fuel over the last few months. We decided to leave our estimated cost of fuel the same as we have in this fiscal year, $2.35 a gallon, diesel $2.60. Our last price that we got was back in April. We were hitting about $2.34 and $2.54. That fluctuates, as you know, this time of year, especially as the summer blend comes in, and holidays come in, that increase goes up, and then hopefully toward the end of the summer, it'll go back down. We've seen it this past year as low as $1.77, so it's fluctuated this year from $1.77 to about $2.35. So we feel like we'll be pretty confident with that. Looking at our general fund, just quickly going through the different departments. Management services, our budget increased only $7,368. The commissioners increased $1,500.
Increase or decrease?
Decreased. Did I say increased? I apologize. Decreased $7,368. However, your budget increased.
Thought you had those backwards.
Yes, sir. $1,524. Mine went down $32,000 because last year I had a vehicle in my budget that's not in there. The city attorney has not changed. Elections, we do have an election this year, so that $10,000 is what is estimated the county is going to charge for our election. Citizen engagement increased. Staff attorney increased $8,000. $2,500 of that staff attorney is for our Student Advisory Commission that we did not budget this year, so $2,500 of that is for the students. Our fireworks went up this year. UGA Griffin, we budgeted that $17,500 again. Historic preservation archway cost at $20,000, and we have $100,000 in contingency as well. The administrative services budget increased, and when you see these increases, most of that is due to the personnel costs that we talked about, almost $75,000 in salary adjustments. IT needs a van. Software maintenance takes up a tremendous part of that budget. As you know, the software is cheap, but you have to pay that maintenance every year. And the more software that we add, the more our maintenance goes up every year. Central services includes our facilities, holding that pretty steady. We are going to inspect our parking deck again this year. We haven't done that in several years, and we estimated $35,000 for anticipated repairs on the parking deck, some carpet replacement here in 1 Griffin Center. The Welcome Center, there's a change this year as we get Historic City Hall and the Welcome Center separated. The Welcome Center will have operational cost of $97,000. As you know, we're moving the archives over to the second floor of the Welcome Center. The archives is another of those partnerships between the city and the county, so that cost is split. The general fund then pays $37,970 toward the remaining part of the Welcome Center. Public safety expense decreased almost $50,000. I told you what we're doing to entry-level police officer salaries. Again, that'll make us more competitive, but this is an ongoing issue in public safety. It's a bidding war out there. Last year, the county raised their public safety officers' pay up to this or a little bit more. They took some of our people over there. We're raising ours up to try to get close to them. But there are places on the south side of the metro area that are now $45,000 plus. Depending on what you bring to the table as far as education and experience. So we will still be behind the curve. We'll still be hiring people, training them, and hitting that 2 to 3 year mark where after they get their training and they meet their minimum requirements, they go to Clayton County, Henry County, Fayette County, Coweta County, and make $5,000 to $10,000 more. Yes, sir.
Let me ask this question. We talked before about raising the bar and setting a standard, why are we continuing to do that? If we know that is the trend and that is what we're going to do, and our citizens are going to suffer, and we're going to lack officers because we don't want to do what is necessary to set the bar, to be competitive, to be the one that people are looking at saying, hey, I need to get down to Griffin. Why are we continuing? I mean, we've been doing this for year after year after year after year, and now we're going to raise it again just so we can continue that same cycle.
Well, it's a never-ending cycle, because when we raise ours up, then everybody else is going to raise theirs up. If you watch the Atlanta Metro News, the same thing's happening all over the state, especially in the metro area. It's a continual bidding war. Some of the agencies on the north side of town are paying $50,000 and $55,000. If you saw, most recently, Gwinnett County was having a news story about how many officers short they are because Sandy Springs, Duluth, Johns Creek, all those are raising their salaries way up here and getting the Fulton County, Gwinnett County, and APD officers, they're stealing them. So I feel like at least for now, this will make us more competitive, but it's going to be an annual thing that we've got to look at every year, because as soon as we raise ours, then somebody else is going to raise theirs, and it's just going to be a continual thing. I mean, we could jump it up to 45 now and be competitive with Henry and Fayette and Clayton, but by the time we do that and they pass their budget, they're going to be up to 47, 48, or 50, so we're still going to be behind. So I just don't see it ending.
Right, I agree. This is a plan to fix it for the now, but what are our plans for step increases? I mean, I have employees that ask me, what then? What can they look forward to? Where is this written for their next increase and for steps and the way it's pay grade study that we did? Where are we going to implement these next pay grades, the next step?
Well, unfortunately, we haven't had a step and grade system in the city of Griffin in probably 16 to 18 years. I guess it's difficult for me to guarantee our employees that next year you're going to get 2% or 4% or 5% because you're going to go from a step 1 to a step 2, because sometimes the funds are not there. So I guess I would like to see us implement a step and grade system, but to do that, then you are going to have to commit that whatever revenues are needed to meet that step and grade, that you're willing to make that commitment when the time comes to implement your tax base. And that's what we've been reluctant to do.
That's what we said. Okay, I'm sorry. You got
Go
ahead.
I'm for it. I want more than just a Band-Aid for the moment. I want a plan, and I want our employees to know when we attract them here from other cities, some move, they bring their families, they want to know that this is their future, that when they can expect their next raise, and
Okay.
it's in writing for everyone.
Okay.
Consistent across the board, and I'll do what it takes.
Even if that means raising the taxes.
Well,
That's what you just said.
Well, I mean, that's what...
Well, you said, will we commit to it? But if I have something in writing to know, I guess we'll cross that board when we get there, but it looks like to me revenues right now are doing great, and you guys did a great job with implementing the salary study that you just did without raising the taxes, so.
Because we were fortunate enough to have some things go down, but from sitting on the board all these years, that is not a consistent trend that the revenues are always up. So I agree with the STEP program, but I also agree that if we needed to raise taxes to get this implemented, I would be comfortable doing that, but not everyone was. So the question is, if we get to that point, because it's fine to have it on paper, but if you are not committed to the idea that you will do whatever to have that go through, then it's pointless, because we'll just be sitting up here going back and forth about where to locate money that's not available.
I mean, I've been told by this stuff can be funded if we know ahead of time, instead of waiting till the last minute, or, oh no, we're in a crisis and we're jumping ship, we're losing employees. Okay, I understand we had to do what we had to do now. That's what was happening. We were in a
Who told you
crisis.
that?
Well, when I came on the board, I had employees telling us we're having to leave, we're doing,
I'm saying, who told you that this stuff can be funded if they don't wait till the last minute? Somebody told you that?
Oh, yeah, we're talking to governmental financial people, yes, it can be
For the
funded.
city?
In the GMA, yes.
Oh, GMA,
Yeah,
oh, okay.
you can fund, Marcus, am I right? If you are planning for a step increase and a program that's,
It does place a financial burden on the city.
I get it.
To garner those resources and maintain that cash flow.
right,
So couple that with what bond covenants and debt that's out there, plus the existing operating expenditures that continue to go up, insurance, health insurance.
I get it.
and everything else. So if we have that program built in and we're doing 3 and 5 year projections, the board then would be saddled with the decision on adjusting rates, adjusting the millage rates, and directing the path of those revenue resources. But the board would have to have the fortitude, like what you're alluding to make that commitment to drive the future revenue stream.
So the way that we did this year, this salary survey was a $2.2 million hit, okay, to our budget. We cut capital, which sooner or later is going to come back on us because you either buy it now or you buy it later. Our health insurance did not go up, which we've absorbed almost $700,000. We've absorbed almost $700,000 in health insurance increases over the last 2 or 3 years. So that's how we made this happen. I am a staunch proponent of a step and grade system. I would love to see a step and grade system. But at the end of the day, when I'm guaranteeing that employee a 2% raise every year, then when I stand before you at this time every year, I've got to have the revenue to back that up.
I think what you're saying, and I think maybe the answer to her question is, when she talks to a constituent or to an employee that wants to know why they're not able to get a raise or to get a guarantee of a raise, that once again it falls back on the elected officials who are willing to make that step in raising the millage rate. I mean, it's just that simple. So it's not pushing it off on finance or the city manager. It is the people who make the decisions are willing to make those decisions, barring everything else.
If we don't negotiate a water authority contract that is in good faith, if they bail on us, I mean, you're looking at tax increases, rate increases, and everything just for the survival of the city of Griffin. That's the most critical issue pending if you're talking about 3 to 5 years for the betterment of the city is that water contract.
And the water contract and stuff, and they're really not going to be no good. We don't have anybody to work to provide service.
Right, but I mean, if we lose the $1.8 million, we lose the revenue stream to cover the debt service, you're looking at a $4 to $5 million swing a year in the budget.
Okay, going forward, police department, their total expense increased $360,000. Again, that capital never ends. We're buying 16 cars. We're reusing some of the equipment from the old cars to keep our price down. We have to replace 800 megahertz radios, body-worn cameras. We have to replace bulletproof vest. The Halo project this year is $12,000. We're having to replace radar units, SWAT gear. We have every year our Explorers Kids Camp. The training facility has expenses of $13,000, and of course, we have to pay Spalding County to house our inmates. $175,200 is what we budgeted this year. Fire department total expense went down because we don't have a capital expenditure of a fire truck this year. One of the few years that we don't have at least one fire apparatus, but they're in pretty good shape now. They do need some new urinals, so I couldn't really turn that down when they asked for those. An enclosure for the fuel tank, and the fuel tank, they need a new washing machine and a train car fire training apparatus for the training facility. Public Works expenses went up almost $400,000. We pay for paving our LMIG match out of SPLOST. We're buying a mulcher, a mini excavator, and we're paying off the lease on a 312 excavator that we had leased through GMA, so that's a final payment on that. The sign shop has a striping system in there. The pool actually went down about $6,000 this year, small savings on chemicals. It's now costing us $80,585 for the pool expenses annually for it to be open 2 months of the year. Parks, we've got some playground equipment that's in pretty sad shape. I don't know that $10,000 is going to replace it, but we'll start there. Tennis courts, it's time for them to be resurfaced again. An aerator and a sprayer. The cemetery has some maintenance and repairs to the office. Family columbarium. And of course, we have to pay Spalding County Correctional Institute for the inmate work detail that cuts the grass. Total capital in Public Works is $239,000. Development Services saw an increase. Land bank property maintenance is now in Development Services. It used to be in your budget. We moved it to Development Services because that includes property maintenance on all of the city property and land bank property. We upped that from $50,000 to $75,000. Archives budget increased. All of our substandard demo comes from SPLOST, CDBG application, code enforcement. I told you earlier we're 3 people short of the 4 in code enforcement. We added a part-time code enforcement officer to assist us to try to get caught up on code enforcement. And as you know, the last couple of months we renegotiated our building inspections from a 75-25 cost now to 70-30, and that's going to cost us about $183,000. Economic development cost increased $114,000 because now Historic City Hall, because that's where the Economic Development Department will be located. The maintenance and upkeep on that facility is now included in Economic Development budget. We estimate that to be about $112,000. Since we don't have any historical data to rely on for the maintenance, the utilities and all on that building, that's an educated guess that the contractors gave us. We conservatively estimated $10,000 in revenue for the rental of that facility. That's the same thing we've budgeted in recent years for the Welcome Center. We do expect this to be a little more popular as a rental venue than the Welcome Center, so hopefully we'll be able to exceed that estimated revenue amount. Okay, I'm going to take a breath and go into our enterprise funds. Revenue and wastewater increased about $350,000. Expenses also increased over $700,000. Shoal Creek wastewater treatment plant decreased a little bit. Potato Creek increased because we've got $156,000 in sludge removal. Supplies went up, and the utilities went up in that new plant. Cabin Creek also increased because the operating supplies there increased because that is also a new plant and utilities in both of those new plants increased. Blanton Mill had a reduction in capital. They're only buying a mower this year. Lift stations went up. Collections went up as well. No, it went down because last year we had a camera budgeted in wastewater collection, so that's why you see that decrease. We added a lab analyst. We also cut renewals and extensions this year as well. We normally budget $50,000 a year in renewals and extensions. We cut that down to $40,000, and of course the capital went down in wastewater. Water, our revenue went up a little bit. Residential actually went down. Actually, technically, the revenue in water decreased, although it shows in your budget that it increased. We started taking delinquent penalties that used to be housed in the electric utility. Because we have combined utilities, we've now broken those financials out. So where we used to take delinquent penalties from customer service housed in the electric department, we now split those out: water, wastewater, and electric, and stormwater, and solid waste. So once you take all those out, the revenue actually went down.
Great. That's me.
Good job.
Okay. Thank you, Marcus. So residential went down, commercial went down, institutional went down, wholesale went up. Just a slight increase in Spalding, and Coweta's about the same, and there's your $337,000 that's attributable to water and delinquent penalties. Expenses also went down about $750,000. Steel Branch went down, repairs and maintenance went down there at Steel Branch. There are your capital expenses for Steel Branch. Dr. Keller's getting a $10,000 vibration tool there at Steel Branch, which is important. Simmons decreased a little over $500,000, basically because of the electricity. We swap the loads in the plants back and forth, so we anticipate, because shifting the load to a Steel Branch will reduce the electrical usage there at Simmons. The capital expenses at Simmons are there. Last year also we had money in there for Heads Creek dredging, which is not in there this year. Water distribution went down. We had a age and quality evaluation last year that's not in there this year. Also had some valve replacement in there last year that's not in there this year. Renewals and extensions, as I said, we cut. There's their capital, meter division.
Back on that dredge, did we do the dredging this year?
Dredge at all.
We haven't dredged. We only did a study on where, how, when. But we haven't budgeted to do the actual dredging yet.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And I know I'm going fast, so y'all stop me. I see some of your eyes are glazing over, so stop me when you have a question. Our water wastewater debt service is over $5 million, principal and interest. The reservoir bonds, you see there, $4.5 million. There's the principal and interest combined. Flint River Pump Station has a GFA loan. You see the principal and interest there. Potato Creek GFA loan, that's the annual principal and interest. And next year, we will add Cabin Creek wastewater treatment plant debt on there and Shoal Creek debt on there. So next year we'll have even more debt. Debt is a necessary evil. It's not our friend. There's your total water capital, your total wastewater capital, the total capital. We transfer $1.8 million to the general fund from our water wastewater enterprise. That leaves the water wastewater department with only $234,000 restricted. Going to the electric department, their revenues are up about a little over $800,000, most of that due to a 5% rate increase that went into effect January the 1st, and your approved 4% rate increase that will go into effect January the 1st of 2020. Residential increased over $2 million, commercial increased, industrial increased, and the purchase power cost adjustment and the environmental cost recovery also increased. MEAG refunding ended. Last year we got $1.4 million, as we have in recent years, for the refunding of MEAG, and that ended this year, so we could not budget for that for next year. Our off-system sales also went down. Now, we do have those third-party contracts with the Alabama towns, and that makes up a little over $1 million. And again, those penalties decreased in electric by almost $800,000 as we put them out in the other enterprise funds. Wholesale power costs increased as well. That's the cost that we get from MEAG for our wholesale power is up $544,000. Some of the consistent capital improvement projects that we have in the electric department are normal line maintenance, system protection. That street lighting is the remainder of our LED project for street lighting. Also, we're doing an LED conversion at Southern Crescent Tech. We have a bucket truck in there, as well as rebuilding 2 other trucks. New customer construction, automated switching, relocations. We've got underground work at the Caterpillar plant, downtown beautification. The total capital in the electric department is $2,134,000. Expenses in electric, their total capital's there. This year, the transfer from electric to the general fund is $8,363,000. Last year, it was $8,137,000. In fiscal year 18, it was $8 million, right at $8.2 million. So we're staying fairly consistent in our transfer from the electric fund to the general fund. That leaves them with only $400,000 of restricted money. So keep your fingers crossed that we don't have any storms. Solid waste revenue went up about $200,000. Their revenues exceeded their expenses by $121,000. Residential collections are down a little, commercial is steady, yard waste is up a little, transfer station fees are up a little bit, and roll-off fees are down. Landfill and transfer station are up because of the new rates that we implemented a couple of months ago. And recycling, we're just trying to keep our heads above water on recycling. We have the contract on the recycling station out there, and that's the only thing that's keeping us afloat on recycling. Their expenses are up almost $600,000. $315,000 of that is disposal fees. That's a CPI adjustment that we get from Pine Ridge Landfill and Republic Services every year. We met with those representatives from the Republic last year. They asked for an additional increase. We were able to negotiate that down some, but they want to meet again in January to prepare for an additional increase in next year's disposal fees. So next year you're going to see that price go up considerably. Other expenses in solid waste include a compactor, some additional roll-offs that need to be replaced, a mower for the landfill pickup truck, and a front load truck that we'll do a GMA lease on. Their total capital, $460,000. That leaves them with restricted $59,505. The airport has total revenues of 1.2, operating they're at 600. They expect 114 in grants. That's an area where we split the operations with Spalding County, so our half will be 113.7. The county's half will be 113.7. The county recognizes the operational cost minus the depreciation, so that's where that 113 comes from. We have debt service. We talked about earlier that Spalding County pays some of the debt service and, of course, is paying us back for the debt service of the prior year's cost. We have to put in to the airport from general fund. That's one of those transfers from general fund back to an enterprise, and we have to transfer 113,736 there. Their expenses look like they're about $1.2 million. Of course, they get FAA funds and state funds on any capital project at the current airport. Their lighting project is $120,000. Their fuel pod, and you see the breakdown there and what comes from the feds and the state and the city and county. And of course, our portion of the debt service on the airport bonds are listed there. And of course, monies for the new airport comes from the bonds, and we don't know if they'll come back and ask for some more money. We did provide them the $165,000 that they asked for a couple of meetings ago. Haven't heard back from them on the current status of the other requirements, so I expect to hear back from them soon on that. And that's just an explanation of that new airport debt service principal and interest. Stormwater enterprise revenue went up a little bit, most of that due to the MCI adjustment. Their expenses went up $220,000. They have a lease payout payment on a CAT. They need a long reach loader, and we're going to lease pay that through GMA. Their total capital is only $337,000, leaves them with a restricted amount of $239,000 in stormwater. Our telecom fund revenue is increasing slightly each year. This year it went up $26,000. Their total revenue this year is $543,000. We get $459,000 from the fiber leases that we currently have in place, and that's growing a little bit month by month, year by year. We do plan to transfer $100,000 from the electric department for upgrades of the fiber network. Their expenses are up $142,000. That's $100,000 for fiber, $25,000 for maintenance, and the payback to the MEAG fund, where we got the money from. Another one of our internal debt services is to pay back that MEAG fund. That's $302,850,000 per year to make the MEAG fund whole.
What's the balance after this year's payment? Do we have 1 or 2 more years? 2 more years after?
We got 2 more years, but I'm not sure. Sir? $700,000-$800,000 left to pay that back.
Thank you.
And they'll have $15,800 left, and we split that profit between the general fund. They'll have $15,835 restricted and $15,835 transferred. The golf course is seeing revenue of $220,000. It went up $660 estimated from last year. If everybody plays that we hope will play, we are doing some things to increase play out there, as you've noticed.
Got ball washers.
We have ball washers.
They're the best, I hear. The best ball washers ever, according to sources.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Expenses at the golf course are $725,000. That went up just a little bit as well.
Can we find another tie this into the water contract with the county? The golf course?
Probably a service delivery strategy negotiations need to include the golf course. They do need a sprayer, and we're having to take $465,148 from the general fund to supplement the golf course to keep it operational. That's up from $444,000 estimated in the current fiscal year. Economic development total expense, including our economic development efforts and the historic city hall, total $366,500. Economic development is about $85,000 of that. The DDA is $89,000. We split economic development expense by economic development, DDA, and Main Street. That's split three ways. So that's $84,765, $64, $66, whatever, rounded off. Three ways, and then there are specific expenses pertinent to the DDA and Main Street, so that's why their total budgets are slightly different. DDA board has some training expenses, and they own some property, so they have some expenses on that property and some legal fees. Main Street has some specific Main Street entertainment costs for our Main Street program, so that's the difference in their budgets. True economic development only increased $1,800 from last year. Hotel motel tax, it's pretty dismal. We budgeted $70,000 this current year, and we're not on trend to make that. With 83% of the fiscal year gone, we're only at 71% collections, so we cut that this year down to 76. There's the breakdown on how we have to spend that money. We have been taking that 18.75 for the Welcome Center because we deem that to be our convention center. We're moving that to Historic City Hall since we're moving the banquet room. GSBTA, as our designated marketing organization, gets 43.75%, and the general fund gets 37.5%. Other special revenue funds are basically in and out, like hotel motel tax. We are planning to apply for another CDBG. If we get that CDBG grant, $750,000, we have to match with $636,000. Our court technology fund is $25,000, and that pays for maintenance on our court software and other items technology related for the courts. Our splost revenue, based on not collections but based on what we initially projected, is $3.8 million. Debt service on our bonds, and those are our annual pay-as-you-go amounts that we have. So, now, with all that said, any questions? Concerns, issues? We have a public hearing scheduled for tonight. In case the public or you or anyone in our audience has any questions about our presentation this morning, we have advertised in accordance with the legal requirements for a budget, so that public hearing has been advertised. Then in our next meeting on June the 11th, I think it is, we'll have another public hearing and plan to vote on the budget that evening unless you have corrections or anything we need to go back and work on.
Good job, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Marcus, Angela. Good presentation.
Immediately.
Pardon?
We emphasize the word immediately
Immediately.
on the adjustment on salary.
Will be in the hands of HR as soon as they can get the paperwork completed. Okay, Madam Chairman, I think that concludes our agenda for this morning. And we will proceed with this budget unless there are corrections that need to be made.
Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Motion by Colbert, and second by McCord. All in favor?
Yes.
Hey, gentlemen.
Yeah.
See you tonight, Doug.